let me introduce you to Lisa Benoit from Books and Company.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for coming. I'm just so excited to be having Anne Hood back, and even though it's just virtually, so welcome. Anne Hood is the author of several novels, including Somewhere Off the Coast of Maine, The Obituary Writer, and The Book That Matters Most. Her memoirs include Comfort, A Journey Through Grief and Kitchen Yarns, Notes on Life, Love, and Food. In addition to her novels and memoirs, she has edited 2 collections of writers writing about knitting, as well as writing chapter books for kids. And many of you may not know that. We do here in Oconomowaukee because we've hosted her at schools twice, and it was wonderful. Her most recent book is Fly Girl, which Laura Lippman says at first blush is a charming, layered memoir about Anne Hood's life as a flight attendant who knew the industry in its glory days and its not so glorious days post-deregulation. But it's also something much more, nothing less than a manifesto calling us to embrace joy and adventure however we define them. And I couldn't agree more. This is really about adventure and being curious and the joy of all of that. So welcome, Anne. It is a delight to have you.
Great to see you, Lisa, and Daniel, hello, and everybody out there. So nice to be here.
And Anne, do you want to start by reading a little and giving us a flavor of Fly Girl so we can get down to hanging out and talking the glory days?
Yeah, so I have my blur thing on, so it's always hard to, where do you see
well,
it?
Let's see if I can make, I've got my Gatley, which is
there we go. Hey, thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm actually going to read from the prologue, which is sort of where I thought the story began. In some ways it began when I got hired by TWA. In some ways it began when I interviewed with all the different airlines. In some ways it began with reading a book called How to Become an Airline Stewardess. I am sure we'll talk about all that, but I think I ultimately decided it began way back. So I'm going to read a little from the prologue. A friend of mine recently said to me, I love when you start a story with when I was a flight attendant, because I know it's going to be a good story. At dinner or cocktail parties, when someone asks what I do, they often look at me blankly when I say that I'm a writer. Have I read anything by you, they ask, often accompanied with a narrowing of their eyes. Or, have you ever published anything? Sometimes even people I know ask me if I'm still writing, as if it's a hobby and not a career. But once I say those magic words, when I was a flight attendant, everyone is suddenly interested. What did I actually do on those planes? What was the scariest thing that ever happened? The weirdest? Was the job fun or was it boring? Did I actually get to see any of the places where I flew? Was there really a Mile High Club? Did I date pilots, passengers, famous people? Flight attendants still hold the mystique they had back in the golden age of flying, even though, as one flight attendant described it to me, I started to fly when every passenger was treated like they were in first class and stopped flying when most passengers felt like they were riding a Greyhound bus, not a jumbo jet. I have the unique experience of starting as a flight attendant at the end of those glamour days and stopping just as service, legroom, and meals began to disappear. I flew through the start of deregulation, an oil crisis, massive furloughs, startup airlines, corporate takeovers, and a labor strike. I didn't see it all, but I saw a lot. I couldn't know that I would come of age at a remarkable time for aviation, when flying was still glamorous, and flight attendants were considered to be beautiful and sexy ornaments, even as they fought relentlessly for women's rights against age and gender discrimination, and for career professionalism. I worked in one of the most demanding, sexist, exciting, glorious jobs a person can have. I was a flight attendant.
I know, that is so wonderful. Do you have a good question, Daniel? Do you want me to start?
I would love to. I was trying to figure out. You've visited Lisa, and back when I worked at Schwartz, you visited Schwartz, and I don't think we did get to meet, but I know you spent a lot of time with my former colleague and still good friend Nancy.
Yep.
And I think you might even still via Facebook and stuff.
That's right.
But and I've read your books before. You have a lot of books. I think, did I count this right? Is this your 30th book?
Oh God, that makes me seem so old, but I think you're right, because I did do that series for middle readers. So that
Yeah, that's what. So that's
stuff the numbers.
it's back
Yeah,
in
yeah,
the deck, baby. It's okay.
yeah.
Prolific. It's not old, it's prolific.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
That's right. But why did it take so long for you to write this book?
Oh God, that is my favorite question, actually, because the first time I got asked it, I was like, what was I doing? Why did it take so long? But I think it was sort of that, I thought it was very anecdotal. I didn't think there was a story there. And, you know, as a writer, I'm always looking for the story arc, like the change. And I had this story about something that happened, and this story about a layover, and this story about the airline industry. But I never saw it as a big, complete thing. You know, like each of us every day is living through historical and cultural shifts, but we're just kind of living our lives. And then a couple of years ago, right before the pandemic, someone asked that magical question, you were a flight attendant? And I started talking about it, and they said, wow, you lived through a huge change in the world. And I was like, you know, I did. And it made me kind of pause and look back and think about it. And I realized, well, ultimately, this is kind of a coming of age story for me, for the airline industry. It was historical, but I never knew. So it was really wonderful to have that aha moment and then tell the story.
And I think too, you just need sometimes a little bit of distance before you can actually see that, you know, to tell the story long enough that it's not so close.
Exactly. There's nothing like distance, because in a way, I know this is kind of funny, but in a way, the person in here, I had to re-meet her. I had to re-meet that 21-year-old who stepped on that airplane in that Ralph Lauren uniform for the first time and remember how terrified I was. I mean, it's almost, I am a character in this that I had to reintroduce myself to, which was very interesting.
Well, that's an interesting way of thinking about it too, to go back and meet that person.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd want to go back and meet my 21-year-old self.
Some of it was embarrassing. You know, it's like, if you could meet that person for real, would you be like, stop, don't do it? But no,
That's why all these time travel books are so popular, because we're all thinking about this.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So then you wrote it during the pandemic. Was that helpful because you were sort of, you know, you could focus in a different way?
I have to say that I could not, I mean, of course, I wish there wasn't a pandemic and all of the sad and terrible things that happened. But for writing this book, it was kind of the best time to write it, because at a time when I was afraid to go to the grocery store, every day when I sat down to work, I was traveling. I was reliving the time in my life when I could and did go everywhere, anytime, all the time. And it really was sort of a comfort during those days.
Yeah.
My only sadness was you couldn't instantaneously beam it, because we loved reading it now too, but I think in 2020, can you imagine reading a book like this? It was just like,
yeah, it was a solitary pleasure writing it, but
I love the narrative arc in the book, and it's interesting that it took time for you. I've got to get. The book works to me in a lot of ways, in addition to being just an entertaining story. But I love how it is really, in a lot of ways, a making of a writer. I actually went to Lisa and said, Lisa, this is like the nonfiction version of Lily King's Writers and Lovers.
Oh, wow. I love that.
Yeah, because, you know, you're talking, you know, you're doing this other job to pay the bills. You're enjoying yourself, of course, but you've got that writing in your head, and the way, you know, you're getting to the point where you're going to be able to go to the next level. I found it really, as we've said before, there are so many making of a writer books of men. There really aren't enough of women, and I hope people will see that, because to me it's such an important part of the story.
Thank you for pointing that out, because for me it was key to the story. I wanted to be a writer from the time I was 7 or 8, and I read Little Women, The Curse for Many Female Writers, because Jo March does it. and makes it seem like it's possible to do. But I remember thinking, I want to live in the story. I want to, and I started writing immediately, terrible plays and poetry. I was this little kid, newspapers that I would sell to my family for a nickel. I just wrote all the time. But I realized at kind of a young age that I didn't really feel I had a lot to write about. Once again, many years later, I realized that was wrong, but I thought writers needed adventures. I thought I had to run with the bulls, and jump into fountains in Paris, and all of that stuff. And when I read that book, How to Become an Airline Stewardess, it promised many things, and many of them were attractive and some were not. But one of the things it promised was adventure. And I thought, if I have that job and I have these adventures, it will feed my imagination so that I can become a writer. And I never lost sight of that goal. I will say for the first couple of years, I was like so jet lagged and I didn't have a regular schedule and I was always waiting to be called to go to a trip. I wrote very little, but once that kind of settled and I settled into the job, I filled many notebooks and ultimately wrote Somewhere Off the Coast of Maine, my first book, actually on airplanes for the most part. Yeah.
We just had a customer come in and she remembers the day that she bought the hardcover at Harry W. Schwartz Books. And she's been a fan the whole entire time. So here's a shout out to her. But it was such a nice conversation. And it made me think of not only your writing, but also the book that you wrote, Morning Star, about just becoming a reader, which is that first step, and how being a reader really connects us in so many different ways.
Absolutely. We know that for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And hello to that person who came in. Wonderful. Thank you. I love that.
So with writing it, I just lost what we were talking about. I feel like I interrupted Daniel. But when you were writing it during the pandemic and you were kind of on your own and people, you were reaching out all the time, and what that must have felt like for you to reach out to people you haven't talked to. And so we didn't get to feel that joy of sharing the stories during the pandemic, but you certainly did with old friends. And what was that like?
Oh, it was lovely. So right before the pandemic, I actually was lucky enough to take a trip out to California and visit my old roommate. So we've been in touch since 1978 when we were in training together. And I went out and stayed with her in Santa Barbara. And it was funny because I was really peppering her with questions that continued throughout the pandemic. And at one point she said, thank you, because I have to feel connected to something. And it's really great to be connected to those days. She had the same feeling I did. I did feel, as the only writer in the bunch that I was communicating with, my memory or sense of observation was so much better than theirs. It's so funny to say that, but I was like, when we served that first class dinner, I remember this course and that course and this, but what was the potato or the starch? And they're like, you lost me at salad. Like, I don't remember any of that. Some of them said, I'm like, wait a minute, we did that every day. Are you kidding me? And there were many, many examples of that, On the other hand, they would say one insightful thing that would kind of take my breath away. Like Diane, the roommate I'm talking about, texted me. I was talking to her about training, and in particular, our emergency training, which was very intense. And she texted back very simply, but she said, the day we did our first emergency evacuation training was the day I realized what the job was really about. And she said it kind of scared the hell out of me. Because, we got into it for like floating down the aisles, in your snappy uniform and handing out drinks and then landing in London or whatever. But really, we were there for safety. And someone said to me the other day at an event, she looked at me and said, you just scared me. I realized that my life is in the hands of a bunch of 22-year-olds when I'm on a plane, often, new people. And I said, you're right, but those people are so well trained. I mean, it was very intense. But anyway, it was so fun to reach out to everyone. And I actually did a really fun thing. I had a dinner party, and I recreated the first class dinner to write about for Food 52, which is a food and website. Yeah. And my old friend, Matt, flew out from LA just to do the dinner with me. And we had a cart. It's the cart that I like like my butcher block cart that I store my bowls and stuff on. But we set it up like we used to, and we just did it. Like he was wrapping the silverware and the napkins, and I was putting the salad stuff, and then we rolled the food out. And I had like 8 friends over. It was funny. And he looks at me and said, "Do you want to carve or serve?" And I said, "I'll carve." And then we looked at each other and just started laughing. It was like no time had passed. But the friendships go deep because you are together a lot, and it's intense.
Did somebody record that? Did somebody?
We have pictures, and the article was just edited, so I don't know when it's going to come out, but it should be soon. Since it's a web thing, they usually happen pretty fast. But it was really fun. It was really great.
Oh, that sounds so great.
What did you serve?
Well, we did the first class dinner with a little tweaks, but that TWA was famous for Chateaubriand.
Chateaubriand, yeah.
Okay. But did you do the caviar?
We didn't do the caviar.
Okay.
We did the appetizers. People came, and we greeted them with champagne, which is what you did in first class. Then we took cocktail orders, and my husband made the cocktails, and we did like warm nuts, which is what we always did. My daughter found old menus online and made them, and she had the descriptions and the TWA logo, and they looked exactly like our menus used to look. We did shrimp cocktail, salad, then Chateaubriand. It used to be a choice of 5 entrees, but the Chateau 5. I know. Okay, hold on to your seat. In coach, it was a choice of 3. When you flew in coach from coast to coast, you get a menu, and we would come and take your order of choice of 3 entrees. Coach was as fancy as first class is now, maybe even fancier on some airlines. I don't know. So we did the whole thing. We did the ice cream sundae dessert cart, and we did after dinner drinks, and everybody had so much fun. And I made people dress up like it was 1978. And I invited people that would be in first class, because back then, very unusual to see a woman in first class, unless she was a celebrity or someone's wife, right? Yeah. And so I have a friend who won an Academy Award. So he was my actor, and his wife was on The Sopranos. So they were my actors. Got them. Everybody was selected for who they are and what they wore. And my friend, who came as like a famous writer, she wore a caftan, and she's like, "I'm just getting the 78.5, out of LA." She had this big caftan. It was so fun. It was so fun.
Sadly, it's not. It was in first class, but I keep picturing airplane none and like.
Yeah, I know. Oh, the nuns. Yep.
I would like to note
a lot that he flew out from LA to do that. That just says so much about the connection.
It is. Oh, it's such a wonderful story, and the friendships in the story are just terrific. The relationships, I just completely fell in love. You could probably write another book and turn it into a novel, just a little drama. You'll never run. You're in a lot of books. You're never going to run out of things to write about. But this could be adapted. Is what I'm saying. It would be a wonderful friendship story. The other thing I really love about the story is the momentum of the book. There was a book I really loved, a music memoir called nobody's ever heard of her. Her name was Jennifer Trinan. She wrote this wonderful book for Houghton Mifflin many, many years ago. And it had such a great momentum, because the first 2/3 of the book is her trying to break it, trying to make it. Yeah. And I've read a lot of commercial musician memoir, and then they make it, and they don't really want to write about the other stuff, because that's the most interesting thing. But for her, she gets the contract and everything falls apart. And by the second album, she's dropped, and no one's ever heard of her again. And so it's sort of like, everything about, and that's the way, in a way, that's the airline industry for you, because you're trying, you're at the peak of glamour. All that stuff about trying to get the job is so great. And
then training. Oh my gosh.
And then, you got some good times, but by the end, in my head, I can still hear the commercial for Capital Air. I don't know.
Yeah, I did it. You know, you're so right to finally get the job of my dreams, right? After so many interviews with so many airlines, not getting hired when I thought I was. And I got hired by United and TWA ultimately. But you know, I always say when I was a kid dreaming of being, back then they were stewardesses. I never got to be a stewardess. They were already flight attendants when I started. But when I dreamed of it, it wasn't like you will fly to Dayton. I wanted to go to like Paris, you know, so United was only domestic back then, even though my father rightly predicted, oh, they're going to be a big international airline, but they were like going to base me in Cleveland. God bless Cleveland. My husband's from there, so nothing wrong with it. But at 21, I'm like, Cleveland, I'm going to be flying these little flights, TWA, I'm going to be based in Boston or New York, and I'm going to, you know, see the world. So I did go with TWA. Deregulation was the year I was hired. And that's when the government dropped being in charge or control of airfares and routes. And it became, the airline industry became the Wild West. They could do anything. Now, I have an East Coast slant. I know that you all had some variation of this, but there were all these startup airlines. Like we had New York Air, flew from Boston to New York for $19. People Air flew from Newark to London for like $69. It was wild, right? And they all went out of business, but they just changed everything. And so as a result, and an oil shortage at the same time, we kept getting furloughed. So here I have the job of my dreams. Then it's like you're furloughed. Then I went to work for Capital Air, came back to TWA, another furlough, got started, worked at a startup, and finally got called back and was finally flying international out of Kennedy and loving my life and my job. And we have a big labor strike, which was also rampant in the 80s. And we all got euphemistically replaced. So I did see kind of everything that happened to the airline industry firsthand, actually. I find it so interesting. When I interviewed in 1978, the 4 big airlines were Eastern, Pan Am, TWA, and United. And United's the only one that survived those days.
Yeah.
The other 3 went out of business.
Because so like American was around, but they just didn't go
Yeah,
to
they
the
were
East Coast.
They were smaller. Yeah, they were a big airline in bodies, like in flight attendants and pilots and stuff, but they didn't have all the routes. It was when they merged with, they bought Allegheny and they bought, then it was US.
Allegheny, USA, or America.
Yeah.
Well,
And
actually,
they bought,
I think it goes Allegheny, US. I love this stuff.
Yeah.
Allegheny, USA, and then you've got the one out of Phoenix that buys, and they buy USA Air, and then that buys American.
right. And then American just grew. Same with Delta. Delta was flying, but they were predominantly in the South, right? And they bought up Northwest or bought up Republic or whichever came first, and then Delta.
Republic, Northwest buys,
right?
Northwest buys Republic, and Delta buys them. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So that's how it all, but those smaller airlines or more conservative ones, TWA, as I say in the book, was always famously in debt and in financial trouble. You know, it was just their curse. They were started and run by Howard Hughes for years. And I flew with flight attendants who would tell stories like, well, here we were going from Kansas City to New York, and Howard Hughes would get on with like Ava Gardner and Clark Gable and all these movie stars and make all the passengers leave. And they would, next thing they knew, they're flying to Europe with all these movie stars. You know, and she said, that's why you always pack a fancy dress, because you never know where you're going to end up. If Howard Hughes steps on the plane, you're not going, you know, to Pittsburgh, you're going to Paris or whatever. Great stories. They had great stories, those women.
When I read that, I was just amazed that you could do that. Like, you could never do that now.
No.
Never.
Probably is a good thing. I don't know.
I don't know if Elon Musk, you know, I can see he seems like the Howard Hughesiest of today's entrepreneurs. Yeah.
So he'll kick you out of your Tesla so we can go somewhere, right?
No, it's SpaceX. You're going to. You thought you were going to the moon, but you're going to Mars.
Well, he has that rebel
was on a TWA. I just want to say, I flew by myself to Chicago when I was in 4th grade.
What? That's so great.
My sister, my older sister, and her husband, still together, got this gig when they were about, I think they were like 20. And they were going to do these surveys around the country. And it was like 50 groups of couples. And they said to my, my sister's very responsible. And so she convinced my parents, who had also, my mother had never flown. My dad was in the war, so he flew. They made this deal that wherever they wound up, I would get to visit them. And so but there was a lottery and they got last place. So they wound up in Chicago, which I thought was a dream.
That's pretty nice.
It's partly responsible why I wound up in Wisconsin, because we drove. They said, "Where do you want to go?" And I was collecting states, like any good child would do. And I said, we went to Indiana, and then the last day, I'm like, okay, let's go to Wisconsin. So we go, like, cross the line. We get to the tourist thing in Kenosha, and they're like, oh, we don't have any time. We turn around.
Oh no! So you had to go back and figure it out, right?
Yes. And I just want to say the flight attendants at TWA were very nice, and it was, they would take care of you because I was.
Yeah, the unaccompanied minor, of course. We used to do this again on coast to coast or international flights, a mint service in coach, and we had these. I don't know if you guys know these melt-away mints. They're like light pass. Okay, so it was like a melt-away mint, but it was bigger and flat and had the TWA logo, and we put them on silver trays. And we were taught, if there are children on the plane, ask them if they'd like to serve the mints. And always they did. And they would get up and they'd walk down the aisle, and then we were to get on the intercom and say, we'd like to thank our youngest flight attendant, Debbie, and, and Jim for helping serve with the service today. And then everybody would clap. So if you were on a longer flight, you would have served the mints.
I know, it's just Chicago, no mints.
Yeah, no mints.
Well, and I called home the other day because I was like, what airline did we fly in when we flew to California? And they said, we never flew to California. I was like, well, didn't we, when we went to the zoo at San Diego Zoo, didn't we fly? Wasn't that why I had the earache? And my mom's like, no, we couldn't afford to fly.
Well, that's the truth, right? It used to be so expensive. That's so funny. You thought you did. I love that.
Well, and I think in my head, I just remember them. I remember this thought that it was because I flew. So, and then I wanted so bad to be a flight attendant. My mom's like, that was not you.
Oh my
So
God.
I don't know where the memory, but I was sure that we had.
Oh, I love it. That's so funny.
Maybe it was that strong desire, all that marketing in the early 70s.
Totally.
It really was. All that marketing and that Barbie doll, airplane, all of that. I convinced myself.
Oh, I love that story.
Yeah, but it's pretty powerful to fly, the memories of flying for the first time and that freedom that it offers.
Oh yeah, I ran, as I write about in the book, I kind of bamboozled my friend Nancy, who had no desire to go anywhere, but I said, we should go away this summer, junior year. I was working as a teen model at the local department store, and she was scooping ice cream at the local ice cream shop. And we had nothing to spend our money on and nowhere to go. So I said, we should go on a trip. And our French teacher was all moonlighted as a travel agent. And so he said, go to Bermuda, it's safe, $99 round trip from Boston. I remember the flight, every detail. Nancy does not. Once again, I asked someone who was like, oh, we did that. I kind of remember. I remembered every detail. But what I remember even more is shopping for my outfit to fly in. Like, you dressed up.
Yeah.
And I got this white jumpsuit that had a fake, like an inset of a blouse. It was just a panel, blue and white polka dots, platform shoes, and white hoop earrings, and like a white bag. And I'm telling this story, I'm doing a Zoom, and whoever's interviewing me, I said, oh, it's so embarrassing. And she goes, I think it sounds fabulous. I was like, wait, maybe it's come back. Maybe I waited long enough. That outfit actually is back again. But I remember shopping for it. Like, you never forget that flight.
Yeah. And then I can't believe you went alone.
We did. 16 years old. I mean, it's crazy, right? We land in Bermuda. My father takes us to Logan Airport, and he's like, don't do this, don't do that, like 10 don'ts. Then he's like, have a great time, have fun. We're like, we can't do anything. And we get there. I watch the flight attendants. I watch everything they're doing. And I'm like, I can be one of them. I was afraid they were going to be sex pots, like in Coffee, Tea, or Me, where there were illustrations of like busty women kind of spilling out of the uniform. Those were the men, their eyes like popping out. But these women looked like I did. You know, they were all American. It was Delta Airlines. I still remember. I remember their uniforms, little white mock turtlenecks. And I remember even waiting for our baggage and like seeing the luggage carousel for the first time. And I'm like, I have got to do this. I mean, this is amazing. These bags are coming around this carousel. I love this. And then we took a taxi to the hotel, which was the Hamilton Princess, big pink kind of Grand Dame hotel. And we get there and they said, well, your room's not ready. So just go to the bar and the rum swizzles are on us. And we're like, we're 16 and they're giving us free drinks. I was like, this is the life for me. I'm going to do this forever, right?
It turned out when you were a flight attendant, though, that the shifts weren't always that good. I love the way you maneuver, like you have to work around, I mean, the hierarchies and things like that, but also the way you would know, like when you can go to San Francisco and, you know, like, and that all the flight attendants know what's the good season for every city and you're working around it. That was
I was
fascinating.
so a victim of the knowledge that I did not yet have. So when you, everything and when I say this is back when I flew, things may be different now, but everything was by seniority, including when you worked, where you flew to, and if you even had a regular schedule. And typically junior flight attendants were called, it was called being on reserve. And what you got was 3 days a week, always consecutive. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, Friday, Saturday, where you had to sit by the phone from 6 a.m. on Monday or whatever day to midnight on Wednesday, waiting for a flight, waiting for the crew scheduling to call and say, we need you in an hour. That call could come at 6. It could not come at all, but you had to be by the phone. No cell phones, of course, right? I mean, you had to be home. Or it could come at 5 minutes of midnight after you waited 3 days. And then out of the blue, I held this flight to San Francisco. I was like, for the whole month, I thought I am the luckiest person. When I boarded that flight, I realized we were all juniors, so something was fishy. Because why would 12 junior flight attendants have a 36-hour layover in San Francisco? Like, that's just not going to happen. Well, it turned out that there are 2 months a year when San Francisco is so foggy that about 60% of the flights don't land there. So you don't get to San Francisco. You maybe get stuck in LA. More than once, we had to land in Bakersfield and they bussed everybody the 4 or 5 hours from Bakersfield to San Francisco. So it was always a disaster, but I thought, okay, but I got to see San Francisco sometimes. And then in the summer, I got to hold a Las Vegas line because it's 120 degrees there every day and no senior flight attendants want to go there. So then I had the knowledge that I could avoid it next time, but that happened quite a bit.
That would be just that part of it is part of the whole adventure and growing the stories, because so many stories happened when things don't quite go right.
Always, exactly. And that happened all the time, as we know from flying, right? Just as we know, when you get on a plane, you cross your fingers that everything's going to go the way it should. And a lot of times it doesn't. But I also always say life unfolds on airplanes.
Yeah.
You know, you're in that metal tube at 35,000 feet. They don't fly 747s anymore, but that was our biggest plane with 400 people. Stuff's going to happen. You know, stuff's going to happen.
Yeah. And you got to see a lot of it. You saw a lot of the real graceful moments. Did you have any that didn't make it into the book?
My gosh, so many. I mean, I had to pick and choose. You know, and then I even had put some in that we edited out just for tightness and, you know, the movement of the story. But there was so
one. Give us one. Tell us a story that didn't make it in.
Oh, let's see. Okay, there was the night that I lived in St. Louis, right? And my roommates and I went to a bar. And a guy was just trying to, you know, he knew we were flight attendants, and that just was, some guys just wanted to have a date with a flight attendant. They didn't care. You could be anybody, anything, act anyway, wanted that date. This guy was so aggressive and he just was all over me. And I just was so mean to him. Like, get away from me, stop. I was so mean. And I ended up walking out of the bar. And then I have a 6 a.m. flight the next morning. And who is sitting in my section? Oh yeah, that guy. And he was not happy. Well, he was happy because he got to torment me for 2.5 hours, right? Wherever the plane was going. call bell. I would like more coffee. I didn't like this coffee, and I just had to serve the guy and be nice.
Yeah,
And
we
get in the
have different
galley.
coffee in the
Oh,
back. There's
yeah.
other coffee here.
The good part of it was my roommate had been there the night before. It was on my flight with me. So we could go in the galley and kind of giggle about it. Like, what are the odds? Not only that he's on the plane, but he's in my section and I have to serve him for 2.5 hours. Oh, man. Oh.
And obviously, one of the big stories of late about flight attendants has been how much they have to deal with problematic customers. Has this been like, what do you think this is a long time coming? Has this always really been like this? Has been like, what do you, I'm sure you have thoughts on this. What?
Yeah. Well, there's a caveat here, which is we've all come through this historical, I hope we're through, we cross our fingers, coming through it. We've all been through this historical time with the pandemic. And I feel like flight attendants took a big hit of the brunt of a lot of people's anger and confusion simply by doing their job, the mask mandate, right? And I can say, my cat's going to try to get in here. I can say that there were not similar things, but we had things too, like back when you couldn't smoke a cigar and people would fight with us. Back when smoking stopped, people would sneak cigarettes, there used to be, you could smoke and then you could. So just doing your job can get passengers pretty angry sometimes, or they can behave badly. The pandemic being the ultimate expression of that. I cannot believe the things I heard that happened to flight attendants, getting their nose broken, teeth knocked out. I mean, the videos that would play, everybody was in such a strange place in their lives, in the world. I have heard that those incidents are down something like 98% now that the mask mandate's been lifted. So I hope that some civility is returning. I really do. And maybe this is why I was hired as a flight attendant, because I am this optimist, but I really do think people are really nice. Sure, I had buffoons and I had aggressive people and I had intoxicated people, but they were never
in the book. Yeah.
I had to read the book. You'll see I had it all. But mostly people were really kind and nice or fun or wanted to be left alone. Like, I'm that person on a flight. I don't want to talk to everybody. I just want to get my drink or, my coffee and read my book. And most people are that way, So I hope that things have calmed down enough that we're returning to more civility.
Me too.
Me too.
Yeah. I think we are.
Yeah. So with all the stories in the book, you often say, these are incidents that you share this moment with somebody and you never see them again. Has anybody who have read the book and the stories, have they come and said, hey, that was me?
Oh, Lisa, I wish. I love that question so much. No, one of the things that I realized as I was writing the book, and it's good for a writer to have this, but frustrating as a human and as a flight attendant, I never knew the end of a story.
Yeah.
People got on, something happened, they left the plane, and I never know, did they get the job? Did they get married? Did their children forgive them? I mean, you would hear people's deep, dark secrets, and I never knew the end. And I always say when someone brings that up, if you're out there, let me know. If you read the book and you're that businessman or you're that woman who had a white suit on and was going to that interview, let me know what happened, but we just get the beginnings of the stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was curious, in terms of reaction to the book, you noticed, to me, this is a story about, it's a feminist story. It's very much about, working through a bad setup and situation. And, I know there's another Stewardess flight attendant book out that's a little more historical and political. Have you noticed any sort of like generational schism about the way young people look at the book about the way older people? Because it just strikes me that I'm pretty close to your age, and it strikes me that we kind of bore with a lot of, I mean, in a way that's really great, that we bore with a lot of things that younger people do not take. But on the other hand, sometimes I think, oh, you really have to give somebody have a little patience with this sort of
Yeah. You know, I'll give you a couple examples. One is recent and it's very funny. I was reading a section of the book about the first flight I worked. And one of the things I say is I get to the hotel and I stank of cigarette. I stank of smoke. My hair stank of smoke, my uniform. And this woman in the audience yells out, "Was the plane on fire?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, why would you smell like smoke?" And I said, "Oh, people could smoke on airplanes." And she said, "What?" She was shocked. But more importantly, to your question, my editor's assistant was very hands-on with editing the book. She read it, she read revisions. And her comments, you know, how like Google Docs or whatever we use these days, they're kind of in the right-hand margin. They were often all caps and question marks and exclamation points. Like, "You were weighed? What? Your roommate was fired for being 5 pounds overweight?" But just these big, like she could not believe those things. On the other hand, as we worked on this book, she also couldn't believe how early flight attendants were fighting for rights. You know, this I think is in the book. I think it did stay in, but I'm not sure. On the earliest flights, when they finally landed after like 15 legs to get not so far, they would fly 15 stop and goes. Pilots got a hotel room and the stewardesses slept on the plane.
No, that was not in there.
It's
Well,
not in- okay.
I don't remember that, but maybe it was.
Yeah, so they slept on the plane. So they were fighting way back then for like, if those guys men get a room, we get a room. Then as a flight attendant and a signing I did the other day told me, we had to share rooms. You were so tired. And there were 4 women in a room. Pilots had their own, fighting for those small things. They're big, but you know, those incremental changes. But you had to quit when you were 32. As TWA famously said, if a man doesn't want her when she's 32, TWA sure doesn't. So you had to quit. They fought for that. They fought to be able to keep their jobs when they got married. They fought to keep their jobs when they had children. They did not win that case until the mid 80s, because I was there when we call them the mothers. The mothers were able to return to work. They'd been fighting that for years, decades. And of course, the last one to go was the weight requirement. And that was not lifted till 1992.
92, 30.
92.
Wow.
That's like yesterday in
Yeah.
the scheme of, right? Yeah.
Well, thank
So
you. Thank you for everything you did and all of that. So
Yeah.
And it just makes you, I mean, it just silences you. You just to think about that. It seems so ridiculous that we would have done that. And yet then it's what we put up with.
But, you know, I do want to add something, because of course the sexism is, you know, obvious and we all know about that. But men were fighting to become stewards or whatever. They didn't win that right until 1976. That's when stewardesses became flight attendants. They needed a gender neutral name because now men, there were men working as pursers. So interesting. They were in charge of the flight attendants. They were flight attendants or stewards, they were called, but they ran the service on international flights. But to be a flight attendant didn't start until 1976 for men. And that was one guy fighting Pan Am. He wanted to work for Pan Am, and he had all the requirements and finally won. And then the floodgates opened.
So he spoke another language, in other words, too.
That's right. Yeah. I didn't. I couldn't get
kind of did.
Oh,
Almost.
it was my saddest thing. Oh my God. They were like, "You're going to be in Honolulu in 2 weeks. Go get your uniform fitting. But first, just pass the language test." And that guy looked at me and it was like, please put your bag in the overhead compartment. And I was like, I took French for 9 years, but I don't know how to say that. And on and on.
We do have a
No
question.
Honolulu for me.
Oh, we have a question from Susan who would like to know who is the most interesting or famous person you met as an attendant? And feel free to mention more than one. So
Okay. Oh my God. I have to tell this one story and then I'll say more. But so I actually sold my first book somewhere off the coast of Maine while I was working as a flight attendant. And I was on a flight from Kennedy to Tucson, Arizona. And this guy got on, and I was working in first class, and he got on. And the thing, as I said earlier, first class passengers were businessmen. I mean, they just flew all the time. You know, they barely paid attention to you. They just were doing this so regularly. But this guy got on, and it was like he'd never been on an airplane. He's pushing all the buttons. He's frowning. He's harumphing. He's doesn't know what to do with his bag. He's just acting super weird. But I get him settled. And then, it's time to ask, would you like a drink? And he goes, why did you ask me that? And I said, well, that's what we do now. I ask you if you'd like a drink. And he says, well, how do I know what you have? So I very patiently list the 8 million things we have, from sodas to coffees to cocktails to whatever. He orders or not. He's weird the whole flight. And then my light is shifting here. Sorry, guys. And then it's time for the ice cream sundaes, a big thing on TWA first class because we did these ice cream sundaes. So I said, would you like an ice cream sundae? And I got my little cart and he says, why? Why are you asking me that? Ice cream is for children. Okay, at this point, I say, where are you going? Like, who are you? I've just started. And he says, I'm a New York Times bestselling writer, and I'm going to give a talk at a literary festival. And I say, oh my gosh, I'm a writer. I just sold my first novel. And he looks me up and down and he says, no, you look too dumb to be a writer. My TWA training kicks in, even though I wanted to kick him. and I say, well, I'm sure what you mean is you don't expect a flight attendant to also be a published writer. And looks me up and down again. And he says, no, you look too dumb to be a writer. A few years later, I am at the ABA, which later became Book Expo, right? And I'm signing the galleys of Somewhere Off the Coast of Maine. And for people who don't know, this is when all booksellers come and they get all the books that are coming out, all the galleys. And there's a long line for my book, as there is for every book. And I look up just to kind of see.
Fans of new fiction, you were hot line.
Thank you. You remember. But I look down just kind of getting a gauge of how much longer, how big's the line or whatever. And I look and there's that guy. He's in the line to get my book signed. I was like, I cannot believe this. It's his turn finally, puts his elbows on the table and he goes, I bet you don't remember me. And I said, oh, I will never forget you. And in my mind, I'm like, and I'm going to tell this story for the rest of my life. I have never said his name, but oddly, a friend of mine not very long ago was at a dinner party at his house and said, he said that you were his flight attendant and you had such a great connection. Isn't that funny? Like, what? It's either, I know it's crazy. It's either that I did my job so well that he believed that, or he's just delusional. I don't know which. Okay, so that's one famous person story.
And when he dies, we'll find out who he is.
Maybe, yeah, perhaps. Maybe. Yeah, I sometimes give little clues, but no one has figured it out. Okay, so my other famous person story is someone who was running for president. And I was on a San Francisco layover on that flight I talked about that we almost never made it to San Francisco, but we did. And I read in the San Francisco Chronicle that morning an interview with him about how he always flew coach. I mean, this was sort of the focus of the interview because he was a people's candidate and he wanted to be among the people. And he did not believe in this elitist first class, right? So I'm on the flight, I'm working in first class and there was a curtain. There was no business class, it was first coach, right? And there was I just remembered another story that I didn't put in the book that I will tell if you want, but there's a curtain and I'm kind of getting stuff ready and I hear psst, psst on the other side of the curtain. And he's like, hey, any room up there? And I recognize him. And I say, oh my God, I'm so excited to meet you. I mean, I liked this guy as a candidate. And he's like, yeah. Any room up there? And I said, well, there's empty seats. And he said, can you move me up? And I said, no, you like to fly coach. I read it this morning. And he goes, sweetheart, no one likes to fly coach. And I said, if you want to move up, let me get the credit card machine. Like, and he said, no, the girls just put me up here every time. And I said, not this girl. And I closed the curtain. And he ruined me. I was so idealistic. I was going to vote for this guy. Not happy.
I love it.
I do too. So we have a question about favorite cities or towns that you flew to.
Dayton? No,
Dayton?
Actually, I did like Dayton. I got stuck there in a snowstorm for 3 days. And I went to like, there's some museum. It's like the Air Force Museum or I don't know, maybe someone from Dayton knows. But I was able to go see this thing and it was actually kind of fabulous. You could always find something wonderful wherever you went. In Wichita, Kansas, we used to stay at the Top Hat Hotel. It was this little hotel in Wichita, and there was like a Mexican restaurant or something. Like everything had its charm and you just had to find it, you know? But I will say that my favorite city was Cairo. And I write about it in the book, but this was sort of like one of those moments where you say, I am so far from home and I'm so lucky to be here. In my mind, those pyramids were out in the desert. In my Golden Book encyclopedia, there was nothing around them. There was like sand and little pyramids, but really they're very close to the city and you could almost touch them. And I remember going to lunch with the crew and seeing those pyramids. And every time I went to Cairo, and I actually went there once on a vacation, you know, not just flying, I never lost my awe at being in that ancient history. That was very cool.
That would be, and I love that part in the book too, when you're learning about all the different food and being introduced to a whole different, and how kind all the attendants were taking you under, and how that all often wasn't the case. Sometimes that wasn't the case, but often it was more, they were the kindness and teaching.
Yeah. This wide-eyed girl. I mean, I get it. Some flight attendants were kind of jaded and they'd see, oh, I'm a new flight attendant, or as I talk about in the book, my first flight, you know, and the LA crew really was like, I can't believe we got stuck with this one. But most of the time they were so happy to show you or tell you what they knew. Yeah. Which was great. Yeah.
You always wonder about the people who are kind of mean to you when you're starting out, and whether it's like some sort of hazing, like they got treated badly, so they're going to pass it on. And if you can just turn that around and be nice to the new people, then they'll probably be different to the new people after them.
I agree. You know, talking to my friend Matt, my wonderful friend who came to do that first class dinner with me, he told me a story when I was asking him questions for the book that he had never told me, which was it was his first international trip, and it was to Brussels. And he said to the crew when they landed and they were kind of waiting for the bus to the hotel, he said, well, what do we do now? You know, where do we go sightseeing? Or he was so excited. He'd never been to Europe. And like big, you know, he's in Brussels. And one of them looked and said, we don't do anything. We go to bed. You do whatever you want. And he felt so deflated. And he promised himself, I will never be that person. And so he became this ambassador, you know, for new flight attendants. He became the person who's like, you're going to come with me. He told me a story about being in Tokyo, and these wide-eyed flight attendants were kind of scared. The city was so annoying. And he's like, you come with me. I know where to go. And so that bad experience, he turned into many good experiences, you know?
Yeah, that's lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to show that picture of you as a flight attendant?
Oh, yeah. Let's see if I can do it with the blur and the light. Here I am.
Oh,
I just love it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's my beautiful uniform. You know, I talk a lot about it in the book because I loved it so.
Did you get to keep it, or did you have to turn it in?
No, I got to keep it. And I have to tell you, this was kind of so like sad for me. I kept it. And, you know, I was always moving apartments. I lived in New York City. I had no closets, all that stuff that we go through. And so I brought it to my parents' house, and I remember where I hung it in their garage. And, you know, when my mom died, 4 years ago. There was not a lot of good things about it, but I thought I'm going to go to that armoire and get my uniform, and it wasn't there. And I sold that house. I unpacked everything, and it was gone. I don't know what happened to it.
Sometimes you just don't know. You know, when I was in junior high school, I painted a portrait of Wilma Flintstone. And I don't know why it was so meaningful to me, but I left it in the house for 30 years later. And I went back and my dad said, oh yeah, we dumped this.
Oh, you know what did survive, which I'm really happy about, is my name tag. TWA name tag with my name, like the one you wore on your blazer, which was the big thing.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I have that, and I did wear it for that first class dinner party I had. I put my name tag on.
I don't know if you're a hoarder like me, but it's sort of like sometimes I thought, oh, maybe it's good for me not to have everything. And sometimes things are better in your memory too, I guess.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true.
We're still doing show and tell. So if people don't know from our promotion, if you buy the book from us, you get a sleep mask. And you're now going to show the Fly Girl sleep mask. I will tell you, you can pick it up in the store.
I've got a
or
glare.
we can send it to you UPS.
There, I got it.
Yeah.
Or priority, but we cannot send the sleep mask media mail. So apologies on that. But
Okay, I have to say something. This is not a flimsy mask. This is a really good sleep mask. Because, you know, I got one, obviously, when Erin, my publicist, and she sent me the little kit that it came in. And I put it on, I was like, oh, this is the real thing. Like, I travel with this now. This is a really good sleep mask. Of course, it's a sign of our times that some people at giveaways, like when I'm in person, they do this. And I'm like, no, not that kind of mask. This kind of lift it. No, not that. This.
You won't breathe.
Yeah, it's a great sleep mask. I'm so happy people are getting it.
Well, welcome to the Oconomowaukee Shopping Network. I feel like we could be like one of the hosts and say, and now the colors, but it only comes in red.
Red. But listen, not just red, TWA red, okay?
TWA red.
That is a color. That is a color. Crayola doesn't know, but I know.
We were going to ask you about books, right, Lisa? We'd love for you to recommend a few books.
Yeah.
Okay. So I have a thing where I like to read. It's sort of like something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. I like to read something very new, and I like to read old books. And so the new book I read is Mouth to Mouth by Antoine Wilson. And I know this sounds funny and like planned, but it's not, but it all does take place at JFK. It's just a coincidence. It is a book that I wish I had read in one sitting. And you're like, wait, we can't really do that. No, it's short-ish, but the momentum of it is so huge that you want to start it and finish it. Like, take it to the beach, sit all day and read this book. It is a guy who's of lesser means sitting at the gate and recognizes somebody he went to college with. And that guy is really fancy and has really succeeded. And that guy takes him to the first class lounge and tells him a story. So it's that story within a story thing. Tells him a story that's pretty hair raising and you can't put it down. So I really recommend that. I am on a real mission to read all of Jean Rhys. Her famous book was The Wide Sargasso Sea. And now I'm reading Good Morning. Oh my gosh, I looked it up before I told you, Daniel. Do you remember what it was? Good Morning, Mr.
I'll get it in a second.
Yeah, sorry. I even looked it up and now I can't remember again. But she wrote a quartet of books that take place in Paris of women at the end of their ropes. They're desperate women. It isn't a pretty picture, but they are harrowing, psychologically amazing. And you should read them all. Did you find, I'm sorry, put you on the spot.
Good Morning Midnight.
Good Morning Midnight. Yeah, but it is a quartet, and I say read all four. I'm reading now the fourth one of that. So I just like to read an old book. They're not like sequels and prequels, but there are 4 books that take place in Paris. The women are all really her. And so you get a little glimpse into Jean Rhys's harrowing life, which what writer or reader doesn't like that? Yeah.
Well, and you know, those quartets fell out of favor for a little bit, but Elena Ferrante, hey, right?
And Daniel these were just reissued. So they all have the same, they're like beautiful editions. So
I have the link for both Mouth to Mouth to both stores and Good Morning Midnight. Folks attending, if you click on the link and open it up in another screen, it'll be there when we go away. And you can order it from either of us or whatever your favorite independent bookstore is. So,
right, yes, go independent bookstores, especially these two.
no, but other ones too.
Yes, and if,
Do you why don't you give a shot? Like if some, because we don't have signed books from you, if somebody said, I desperately want an Anne Hood signed copy, what independent bookstore could they go to and get it? Is there a store that has?
yeah, we have so many wonderful ones. When I'm in Rhode Island, you know, I split my time between Providence and New York. The Charter Bookshop in Newport, fabulous bookstore. I just did an event there. I highly recommend, if you're in Newport, which many people are in the summer, check it out. Island Books, which is in Middletown, Rhode Island, Inkfish Books in Warren, and of course, Savoy Bookshop in Westerly. So there's 4
I
great
have a
ones.
cousin in Newport. She's an actress.
Do? Really?
She does
Well,
experimental theater.
Oh, my son does that, whatever.
Maybe they
I
work
love it.
together.
It's so interesting. No, my son is an actor in New York and he runs an experimental theater company. And I love what he does and he's so passionate. Sometimes you're kind of like, okay, I don't quite get it, but I'm glad you're doing it. Other times it blows your mind, right? Most times it's extraordinary. That's great. I bet they know each other, Daniel, because it's a funny, it's a funny world. What's
Lisa,
your
do you have a
name?
last question? Rebecca. Ooh, there's a marriage in there.
Oh, never know. Okay, get it to me. I'm gonna ask Sam.
I know her mother's last name, but
Who can keep
I did know her name, but it's been I'm on the spot. You know, it's like when we said, come up with some books. We don't want to put you on the spot. I'm like, I have to memorize all my cousins.
Yeah, I get it.
Lisa, do you have a last question?
Do I have a last question?
It's 8 o'clock.
I know it's 8 o'clock. Do we get a last question?
9:04. Yeah.
It's 9:04. Are you working on something new now? Or are you just kind of riding the joy of this?
I am writing the joy of this, but I have finished a new novel.
Oh, fun.
And it is called The Museum of Tears. And I am so excited about it. And I just have my edits to do once this calms down. And then I take a little vacation in the summer. My daughter I was telling you guys earlier, my daughter just graduated from high school yesterday. My son got engaged the day before. So we have some crazy family stuff going on, all good and wonderful. But when I return from all the excitement, I will do the edits and I hope it'll be out late next year. So The Museum of Tears. I hope you like it. And then I can come back either in person or I'll happily do this again.
Yes, that would be very nice.
But I want you both together because you're so fabulous.
Well, we
worked out a way to do that once in person.
Yeah.
I know, it's amazing. Oh, really, it's fabulous. Great.
Yeah, and we're not that far apart, so it's fun to be together and do stuff. Yeah.
2 great bookstores.
Thank you. And thank you for this. This was delightful. I kept telling everyone it's going to be just like chatting with an old friend.
It was.
Hearing stories. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what the book is like too. Highly recommended from both of us. Hope everybody gets to enjoy it as much as we did. So
Thank you so much. This has been so fun. I really appreciate it. Goodbye to everybody. And I hope I see you two again soon.
Yes. Thank you. It's been delightful.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone for coming. We hope to see you at another event. We wouldn't have either bookstore without you.